We're excited to have with us today Vance Taylor, Chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Mr. Taylor is responsible for ensuring the needs of individuals with disabilities and persons with access or functional needs are identified before, during, and after disasters integrated into the state's emergency management systems. Mr. Taylor was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area and currently lives with his family in Rancho Cordova, California. As a young child, Mr. Taylor was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy and uses a power wheelchair. He has worked in Washington, D.C. as an advisor for two different members of Congress, directed security policy at a National Water Association, and has been principal at a top-ranked Homeland Security and emergency management consulting firm. Mr. Taylor is a nationally recognized public speaker and advocate for individuals with disabilities. Mr. Taylor holds a master's degree in Homeland Security from the University of Connecticut and undergraduate degree from Brigham Young University in Communications. He is married to his sweetheart, Casey, and they have two wonderful daughters. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Vance Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Fernandez. It's telling me that I'm unable to start my video. It says you can't start your video because the host has stopped it. So I think maybe you have to go in and do it manually. Let's see here. Hey, it worked. All right, excelente. Well, muchas gracias y le agradezco por la invitación para estar aquí. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I appreciate it very much. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is, I think, a very important topic. The reality is more and more, all of us are impacted by disasters. It used to be the case that for a lot of Californians, that was something that other people dealt with, right? But more and more, what we're finding is not just an increase in the number of disasters that we face, we're also seeing an increase in the devastation that gets caused by the disasters we face. And so I think you're hard pressed to talk to somebody who didn't smell the smoke from these wildfires. I think you're hard pressed to talk to somebody who doesn't have family or friends, or who they themselves hasn't been impacted by a flood or an earthquake or an evacuation. And to tell you how diverse California's risk landscape is, I will simply say last week, on one single day, we dealt with a freeze, a flood, a fire, and an earthquake. Again, all in the same day. So California is a big state with lots of different risks, and we have to be prepared to address those risks. Before I jump too far ahead on that, I just want to give you some background and some context about my office and why we exist and what we do and kind of how that works. So if we look historically at the way that we as a nation have tackled this issue of emergency management preparedness, when it comes to meeting the needs of people with disabilities, older adults, anyone with an access or functional need, the reality is that we have struggled. Historically, we have not done a great job of incorporating or even addressing or acknowledging those needs.
esas
And
necesidades.
that came to light.
Y eso surgió durante el huracán Katrina.
We saw during Hurricane Katrina that out of everyone who perished, 70% of people who died had an access or functional need. So it forced us to ask, I think, some very difficult questions. And when we looked at the disparity, what we found was that people with access and functional needs were being marginalized. And it was not on purpose. What you had was good, wonderful people trying to do good. But the plans that they were coming up with, their perspectives were limited, right? So let me just give you an example. I use a power wheelchair, and I have most of my life. So when I enter a room, I'm always looking for access, right? If I can get around, if there's steps, if there's a ramp, if there's a table, can I get under it? All these things. But if you walk into that room, chances are you're not looking for any of those things. And that's okay, right? That's not good or bad. It just means we have a different perspective because we've had a different life experience. And so what California wanted to do was to get ahead of this issue. We didn't want to see Californians suffer the way folks suffered across the country when there are press conferences with no interpreters, right? When this life-saving information was falling on deaf ears, when people would point to evacuation maps and not recognize or acknowledge that there are people who couldn't see those maps. We didn't want to get to a place where we would send school buses to evacuate folks, only to be unable to serve people in wheelchairs when they showed up because there were no accessible vehicles. We don't want to put people in that situation where they had to choose between getting onto a bus and leaving their chair behind, meaning they'd have to sacrifice their independence and their mobility, their health, their dignity, or having them stay in the impact area and hoping they'd be okay. And so the governor created the Office of Access and Functional Needs and placed a senior level executive at its head. It's a gubernatorial appointee, and charged the office with a twofold mission. One, to identify what people need before, during, and after disasters. And two, to then integrate those needs throughout every facet of the emergency management process. And so what we found is that in bringing stakeholders and community members to the table, California's plans, in addition to becoming more inclusive, became better. California's plans, in addition to having more community buy-in, enabled those communities who had gone through this integration process to respond more efficiently and more effectively. And not only that, but to recover quicker. We saw a decrease in human suffering and a decrease in loss of life. And while I'm proud of the work and progress we've made, I'm proud of the fact that California leads the nation in inclusive planning. I also recognize that there's more to go, right? We're not going to wave that mission accomplished banner. There's a lot more work to be done. And part of that work has to be not just furthering our own programs, but it's also got to be sharing and being very frank in our engagement with people about what you can expect government to do and what our limitations are. And helping people be empowered by being able to take a more proactive approach in their own personal preparedness. And so that's what I want to focus on today is, what are the things that you can do to actually increase your level of preparedness for any disaster. So I want to walk you through a couple things. The first one really has to do with trying to understand what's out there, right? So you've got to sign up for emergency alerts. In an emergency, you got to know what's going on, right? To make the right decisions, you need reliable, up-to-the-minute information on disasters in your area. You've got to know what to do and when. So you got to know what disaster and hazards could affect your area. And you got to know where to go if you got to evacuate. So you got to be informed. I would encourage everybody to go to the calalerts.org website. CALALERTS, calalerts.org, and sign up for free emergency alerts. Okay, that right there will help save lives. It talks about on that website different types of alerts you can sign up for. I would encourage you to sign up for all of them, right? You can also get alerts through local news reports, radio, TV stations, but you can sign up at Cal Alerts to get information sent to you via email, via text, and it'll follow you, and that's a good thing. I would encourage you to make a plan, right? I want you to think about the people you would want to stay in communication with during a disaster. It could be family, it could be neighbors or friends, care providers, and make a contact list, right? Make a contact list of your friends and your coworkers and your family members, people who could help you evacuate. Put that together and consider everyone on that list part of your disaster network. And you got to be able to have a dialogue with them so that they can understand what type of assistance you might need. And the reason why you're going to have more than one person on the list is because you can't expect that any one person is going to be available to help you at any one point in time. But if you got a lot of people on that list, then you can expect that somebody on that list is going to be available to assist you. So make that list. Coordinate with your disaster network on things like choosing an emergency meeting place, right? Disasters can be chaotic. And you or someone in your network could find themselves cut off or separated from each other. So it doesn't mean a place ahead of time where you're going to reunite with your network. Make a plan for how you're going to get there. And make sure that everybody on that network understands and knows it. Then when you can, practice, right? Run a drill. I cannot tell you how important it is to practice, because when disasters strike, stress goes up. But if you've practiced, then that muscle memory will take over. I want you to think about things like a go bag. I want you to think about the things that you would need, critical items that if you were ordered to evacuate, that you would want to take with you. I always give the example about shelters. The number one thing that people with disabilities forget to take when they evacuate to shelters is wheelchair chargers. Number one item. And think about it this way. When you're going to go to an airport, you're going to travel. I don't know if you do it. I do it. I always put a list on the door, right? Things you got to remember. And that's because I know that on my rush to get out the door, I'm probably going to forget to do something important, right? I'm going to forget my toothbrush. I'm going to forget to leave dog food out. I'm going to something, right? Check my ID, whatever it is. So I make a list, I put it on the door. I see it and I know that in the rush to get out, I'll remember the big stuff. Wants to go on vacation, right? Someplace I want to go, something I want to do. When you're having to rush out of your home because of disaster, when you're having to rush out of your home and you think your life is in danger, you're not going to have time to think about all the things that you need to take with you to be safe and healthy, right? So pack a go bag, have it ready whenever disasters strike. So what goes in a go bag, right? Let's think about that. You're going to want important documents in there. Copies of your ID cards, insurance cards. You might want to put your contact list in there, right? Definitely. You're going to want to make sure that you've got extra medicine, if you can put it in there. When it comes to your medicines, by the way, write down what you take. Write down the medicine. Write down the dosage and the timing. Write down the name of your doctors and their phone numbers. Write down the name of your pharmacy. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a shelter and I hear somebody say, I need my heart medicine. And you ask, well, what do you take? And they say, well, it's a blue pill and an orange pill. Or what do they call it? Well, one's round and one's sort of an oval. Okay. Who's your doctor? I don't know. My daughter takes care of that. What's her phone number? I'm not sure. It's on my cell phone and that's at the house. That makes being able to meet needs difficult. But if you have that all written down, if it's all organized, then we're going to be able to take care of your needs. Yeah, so be thinking about what you need, because what you need is going to be a little different than what I need and what anybody else needs. So just ask yourself that question. If I had to evacuate, what would I take with me? And then start to build that out. All right. Now that's if you're going to have to evacuate. But during some disasters, you're going to have to shelter in place. Right? You're not going to leave. You might not have power. The utilities may stop working, but you may need to shelter in place. So if that's the case, then you've got to have either a stay bag or a stay box. Right? And the way that a go bag has things you are going to want to take. A stay box has things you need for when you stay. So it's really a basic, cost-efficient resources that you can set aside in case of an emergency. So just, basic fundamental things, water, right? You're gonna want a gallon of water for each person in your home per day. So you don't have to buy it all at the same time. But, when you go to the store, just pick up some water, right? Pick up a little extra every time you go. Remember, store it in a cool, dark place. Food, right? You know what types of foods your family likes to eat. So stock up on some of the non-perishable foods you like, right? Think about, well, what can we eat if there's no power? And again, over time, little by little, poco a poco, just pick up some extra food, right? You may have other items to consider, things like formula, diapers, supplies for health needs, pet foods, batteries, flashlights. Remember, no candles, right? Candles can be real hazardous. But think about those things that you're going to need to stay safe at home. And be ready and prepared to hunker down for about 3 days. Right? You got to have enough to be able to sustain yourself for 3 days. All right. There's a lot of content and a lot of resources that are available to you on the internet, different websites. FEMA's got a lot, preparedness. Info, there's some of the Cal OES website. There's a wealth of YouTube knowledge out there as well. And so just spend a little bit of time surfing the web and getting to know what's out there. What I would say to you in closing here is that the way you navigate life right now takes planning, a lot of innovative, creative solutions, and emergency management's no different. We don't always like to think about disasters and emergencies because it can feel really scary. But the reality is you can do this. The reality is this is nothing that's beyond your capability. Take these steps, which many of them are free and very low cost, and know that you're the captain of your own ship, that you don't have to live in fear about disasters, but that you can feel empowered by knowing that you're prepared, by knowing that you've got a plan, by knowing that you're able to evacuate with what you need, that you can stay home and have what you need, that you're going to have information that comes your way, and that you're able to work with your support network and your disaster family to have a safer, more secure outcome. I'll tell you that sometimes I feel like that little bird, it's on the side of the road, and a knight comes up and sees this bird and asks, little bird, what are you doing? And the bird says, well, I heard the sky was going to fall, so I'm laying on my back so I can catch it and hold it up. And the knight laughs and says, little bird, your legs are tiny and you're weak. Surely you couldn't hold up the sky. And the bird stops for a moment, thinks, and then says to the knight, my legs are little and I'm small, but we each do what we can. And so I think about that because disasters are big. And any one of us are going to need support. And so what I would encourage you to do is not just take this information and use it to help yourself prepare. I would also take this information and use it to help other people. It's on each of us to be the right people at the right time in the lives of the people around us. So it's a lift. You lift them and they'll lift you. And together we'll all ascend. So thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to share that info with you. And if you've got questions, I'm happy to take out time and answer those questions as best I can.
Thank you, Vance. We do have a question. Someone asked, give me 1 second. One is, are independent living centers a good resource when they're a long-term wildfire power out?
Yeah, so independent living sources are fantastic resources, I will say. The different independent living centers have different resources and different capabilities. Get to know what they are, familiarize yourself with them. There's also the DDAR program, it's a disability disaster assistance resource program. And that's run through the California Foundation of Independent Living Centers. And a lot of the independent living centers are part of that. And they provide things like backup batteries. They provide things like free transportation to hotels, free hotel stays, food vouchers, all during public safety power shutoff events and during times when there's loss of power. So please call your local independent living center. Ask your local independent living center if they participate in the DDAR program and find out what resources are available to you there.
Thank you. There's another question's a bit long. Says, I also want to know about emergency resources that are available after a disaster happens. If you forget your prescription medication, or if it gets destroyed, where can you get a replacement medicine? Or if your house burns down in a fire, is there emergency shelter somewhere where you can go? Some cities have more resources than others, so what is available to you may change depending on where you live.
Yeah, so let me tackle those kind of as we go. And I think there's a little bit more after that. We can look at that as well.
Yes.
Okay, so look, you go to a shelter and you forgot your prescription medication. Yes, local public health will be there. Red Cross medical support will be there. And they do a very good job of helping with things like lost, missing, or destroyed medicine. Where it gets challenging is in that instance that I talked about. If you can't tell them, this is my condition, here's what I take, here's my pharmacy info, this is my doctor's name and phone number, then it becomes much more complicated. Because then they've got to do health assessments and screenings, and all of that takes time, right? So please write down that information, keep it with you, and yes, you absolutely can and will have access to prescription medication. We just want to make sure you get the right thing at the right time without delay. The other question was about, let's see, if your house burns down, yes, there's going to be an emergency shelter. They're going to designate where to go for safety. It's usually going to be a little bit of a hike, and that's simply because obviously we want to set up shelters outside of the impact area. And while some cities have more resources than others, it's really important to understand that all shelters are going to be inclusive and accessible, and that we will strive to provide wraparound services regardless of which community you live in. Once you get into things like disaster recovery programs through FEMA, those programs are provided equitably in whichever county or community they're turned on at. In order to get assistance through FEMA, the disaster has to be what's called a presidentially declared disaster. And that means it meets a certain threshold of loss, damage, or devastation. not every county will hit that threshold on every disaster. But if you get a designation, know that the programs that are available are not going to depend on which, how much money your jurisdiction has. That'll be applied fairly and equitably.
Are there any other questions? ¿Hay otras preguntas? I don't see anything. Think that's
Actually,
probably-
and one thing I will say is if people have questions afterwards, if Dr. Fernandez, if you want to get those to me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you.
And then also, I'm happy to send whatever resources we can. But if you want to push them out to folks too.
Thank you. I see someone raise their hand. I don't know if, because the setting of the webinar, if they would be able to speak.
Yes, Dr. Fernandez, I will assist you with that. If you can just give me 1 minute to
Thank you.
bring this person up to speak. Gabriela, you can now unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sí, buenas tardes, ¿me escuchan?
¿Sí?
Sí, buenas tardes, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, la escuchamos.
Ah, ok, mi pregunta es, están hablando de desastres grandes, pero ¿qué pasaría si un padre tiene una emergencia, se le incendia su casa? ¿Qué recursos están disponibles como para esos casos?
Ok, so total que digamos que es una casa, solamente una casa que hay un incendio. En ese caso es diferente. Los servicios que van a estar ahí en esa comunidad. Pero probablemente lo que pasaría sería que el Red Cross, the American Red Cross, le ayudaría a la gente en la casa para tener suficiente para quedar en un hotel.
No pude escuchar nada, pero sí se miraba que estaba hablando.
Oh,
¿No puede escuchar?
Ah, ok, perfecto, voy a cambiar de canal. Gracias.
ok, ¿me puedes oír?
Vance, if you could respond in English, and that way the interpreter will go ahead and do the interpretation, please.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so, what I was saying is that if it's an individual house fire, then the services provided by the community are going to be different, right? They're not going to stand up a big shelter. However, the American Red Cross and the community would be able to provide things like a hotel stay or some vouchers, possibly, but a lot of that depends too on insurance, right? So if you've got home insurance, then you're going to be covered for those things. If you don't, then Red Cross and other service organizations are going to be able to assist in some form or fashion. But yeah, definitely there's going to be a difference in level of service provided.
Thank you. Había visto otra mano. I had seen another hand raised. I don't know if they're still. They have a question or.
I don't see any other hands raised. If anybody does
just
have a
mine.
question though, please raise your hand. We have a question from Zal. Zal, I'll bring you up so that you can ask your question.
Is this recording going to be available to the public?
Yes, this recording will be uploaded onto our website and our YouTube page, and we'll provide more information on that as soon as we can.
Thank you.
And I think that may be it. Si ya no hay otras preguntas, if there aren't any other questions, I would first and foremost would like to express our appreciation to our speaker, Mr. Vance Taylor, for his contribution to our town hall. Our deepest gratitude goes to all the attendees of the event that made it happen and to be such a success, especially our North Los Angeles County Regional Center staff. Thank you again for attending this wonderful opportunity, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, thanks, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity and ojalá que todos pasen buen día.
Thank you, Vance. And if there are any other additional questions that come up, we will go ahead and make sure that they're able to reach out to you. Thank you.